Hello, and welcome to People by People, the podcast that is centered around creative thoughts and actions and what you can do to optimize that. My name is Andrew Bastian, a musician, recording and mixing engineer, and producer. In the first mini-series, I'll be discussing what science, philosophy, and greater culture has discovered, and hopefully give you the tools to do your best work and find meaning in it. Episode 4, Ideals and the Self. The idea we have of ourselves is called self-concept. It is impacted by a variety of factors, including how we connect with significant figures in our life. It refers to how we view our actions, skills, and distinctive qualities. The aspect of a person's self-concept, known as the ideal self, is made up of their aspirations, goals, and wants. The ideal self is seen as a motivator inside a person's self-concept, since it is a portion of the self that the person values highly. According to humanist psychologist Carl Rogers, the self-concept is divided into 3 components. The person you wish to be is your ideal self. This individual possesses the characteristics or traits you are striving for or desire to have. It's who you see yourself to be if everything went according to plan. Self-image. Self-image is the only way you now perceive yourself. Your self-image is influenced by a variety of factors, including physical qualities, psychological traits, and social roles. Self-esteem. Your self-concept is influenced by how much you like, accept, and appreciate yourself. Numerous things such as how other people see you, how you feel you stack up against other people, and your place in society can have an impact on your sense of self-worth. Self-perception does not always match reality. Your self-concept is referred to as being congruent when it is in alignment. Your self-concept is incongruent if there is a discrepancy between how you perceive yourself, your self-image, and the ideal version of yourself. Self-esteem may be negatively impacted by this discrepancy. Incongruence, according to Rogers, has its earliest origins in childhood. Children start to construct memories of situations that make them feel unworthy of their parents' love when parents impose conditions on their affection for their kids, only expressing love if kids earn it by particular behaviors and living up to the parents' expectations. Congruence, on the other hand, is aided by unconditional affection. Children that experience this kind of love, also known as familial love, don't feel the need to keep changing their memories in order to think that other people would accept them and love them for who they are. The ideal you. The ideal you is consequently you, but it isn't who you are right now. Rather, it's who you want to be tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and so on. And yet, the ideal self is not a flawless condition. It's also not a final goal or a completed objective. It's actually very different. As a result of its ongoing evolution and change, the ideal self has a tendency to be elusive. You should constantly be several steps ahead of your ideal self. In fact, even if you eventually do reach this ideal version of yourself, it won't matter, since this version of you will be very different, and you'll still be pursuing that. Since it always results in healthy growth and development, this evolution is obviously significant. It is possible that life would lose all meaning if you ever managed to catch up to your own ideal. If there was nothing more to strive for, no fresh challenge was on the horizon, you would inevitably get stuck in a condition of inaction. Life would become ideal since there wouldn't be any incentive to advance or better oneself. Obviously, it doesn't seem too horrific, right? But it's also not that great. It's problematic because achieving perfection causes monotony, unrest, and a life that isn't really fulfilling. With all of this in mind, it's easy to understand why our ideals of ourselves must be elusive. Because you are essentially building yourself every day via your choices, decisions, and behaviors, things usually that change over time. Each of your thoughts leads to a choice, which then leads to an action. Your current behavior and future actions will be shaped by the habits and principles you develop now. In actuality, you are altered in some manner by every event. Regardless of how small they may be, these adjustments always have an effect on the sort of person you hope to become, your ideal self. The future self you have in mind will undergo significant alterations as a result of several modest adjustments made over time. Take a moment to think about these questions. Which aspect of myself do I respect the most? What would I like to continue doing going forward? What about my present actions don't I like? Which characteristics about myself would I most like to change? It goes without saying that there will be aspects of yourself that you are content with and you would not want to change, but there will also be other aspects of yourself where you see space for development. Think of instances where you faced challenges, encountered conflict, made blunders, or had to contend with challenging emotions. The finest version of yourself may or may not emerge from these undoubtedly difficult circumstances. Think on the following circumstances and ask yourself, how do I normally deal with these challenges? How should I react when I mess up? How do I typically respond to conflict? And how should I approach challenging feelings? Consider how you are in these circumstances and how you might be able to do better at being in these settings. Your responses to these queries will serve as the basis for your ideal self. So what is the basis of your self-ideal? Your perceptions of your personality qualities, such as whether you are an extrovert and introvert. Your perspective on life's responsibilities, such as whether you consider being a parent, sibling, friend, or lover an integral part of your identity. Your identity is mostly shaped by your interests and passions, such as your love of sports or your affiliation with a certain political party. How you see your relationships with the outside world, including whether you believe you are making a positive impact on society. Developing self-concept. Our interactions with other people play a factor in how we establish our sense of self. Others in our life, besides our family and close friends, can influence who we are as individuals. For instance, one study discovered that a high-performing student's self-concept is higher the more the instructor believes in their skills. Interestingly, no such link was discovered for kids who perform worse. The stories we hear can also help us create our sense of self. One research discovered, for instance, that female readers who were deeply transported into a tale about a central character who had a typical gender role had a stronger feminist self-concept than those who weren't as touched by the story. Mass media and social media both contribute to the formation of one's self-concept. We are more prone to adopt particular values when these media actively push them. Furthermore, these standards have a greater impact on our sense of self and self-perception the more frequently they are offered. So can self-concept be changed? Self-concept is dynamic, therefore it can shift over time. Our surroundings have an impact on this procedure. The way we see ourselves in these circumstances and how society perceives them both actively contribute to how we will perceive ourselves in the future. The individuals we contact with can alter how we perceive ourselves. This is especially valid for people in our life who hold leadership positions. They can have an effect on both the relational self and the collective self, or the self in social groupings. In certain circumstances, a medical diagnosis can alter one's self-perception by enabling a person to comprehend why they feel the way they do. For example, a person who receives an autism diagnosis later in life may finally understand why they feel different. So what does all this mean? Congruence between a person's ideal self, who they want to be, and their self-image, actual behavior and who they are, is necessary for self-actualization. Our perception of ourselves, our self-image, what we wish we were like, ideal self, and how much value we place on ourselves, sometimes referred to as self-esteem worth, are the three main elements that make up our self-concept. Because it influences our motives, attitudes, and behaviors, our opinion of ourselves is significant. It also has an impact on our perceptions of who we believe ourselves to be, including our feelings of competence and self-worth. When we're younger and still going through the process of self-discovery and identity construction, our self-concept tends to be more changeable. These self-perceptions grow considerably more thorough and organized as we get older and learn about who we are and what's important to us. Being fully engaged in life and realizing what you are capable of are two requirements for achieving self-actualization. Self-actualization is typically seen as a condition that can only be attained once one's basic needs for survival, safety, love, and self-esteem have been satisfied. Self-actualization enables people to match their intentions and principles with their deeds, resulting in a sense of fulfillment and purpose. To obtain psychological well-being, one must work towards self-actualization and carry on growing and developing throughout one's life. You're listening to People by People. Catch you next time.